Well, hello everybody, and hello
We're
Nate.
back. We're
We are
back.
back.
We're back. Hello, Greg. I am Nate Swick. That's Greg Neise. We are here for another What's This Bird live
Yes, we are.
That's a special edition. I think it feels like it's a special edition anytime that we are able to make time to do this. Um, we've got a lot to talk about here on the ABA What's This Bird live, and we're waiting for folks to come in, filter in a little bit, so we'll vamp a
Yeah.
little bit. How's things up where you are, Greg?
Oh, good. I think where you have been, it's been really warm, and it's certainly been.
It's fair to say.
We've talked a couple of
Here
times
in the
this
South.
spring here about how warm this spring has been, and the summer is continuing that trend.
Hmm.
Birds started breeding early. Things are popping.
Things are popping.
But I had some fun a couple of weeks ago with our friend Amar Ayash, who has a new field guide coming out this
Yeah,
fall.
he'll be on the
Um,
podcast.
Probably not probably, I've seen it and actually did a little, and it's gonna be the best gull guide ever. But we were up in
Man, there's a
Sheboygan,
lot of Go
Wisconsin.
Guides out there.
Yeah, but I think this is going to be the one that ends all. It's going to be the ring that rules them all.
The
Yeah,
ends, the Go Guides.
and all be all. But we went up to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, because the Wisconsin lakefront has been hosting for the last few years, well, for a number of years, a lot of summering gulls. And there've been a couple of little gulls up there, and then I think the black-tailed gull that was in the Chicago area is now at Manistee, Michigan.
Yeah,
And
so you think that's the same bird?
oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and it's just hanging out.
Went up the coast. Yeah.
Just went up. I mean, it's easy, just a couple days, not even that, flying up there. But yeah, that's and for later in this show, actually, I got a couple pictures from that day that we'll use
thank
to talk
goodness.
about some birds here.
Lots of
I
gold
see
pics.
Mia McPherson is
Good
here. Hi,
sign.
Mia.
Hi, folks. Hey,
So,
Mia. Hey, on YouTube, I'll give some shout outs to Michelle Poplava, Brant Schoenberg, Christy Bass, Ronan O'Cara, John Washington, Calvin Rees. Hello to all of you out there watching on the internet. We are the ABA, and the ABA hosts a number. Actually, you are the ABA. I don't know. That went in a strange direction. Anyway, we are part of the ABA, and the ABA hosts a number of Facebook groups on social media where we help to identify birds for people. One of those is ABA What's This Bird, and where folks can take photos of birds that they would like identified, post them up on the group, and a lot of our friendly admins and members will help identify those. Every once in a while, we get some birds that we like to talk about in a little bit more depth. Greg will go through it, grab those, throw them into a slideshow, and invite me on to talk about those birds and talk about bird identification more generally, and also have some fun with a bunch of birdie people here on a Friday afternoon. Well, afternoon where I am,
absolutely.
morning where some folks are. But that's the gist.
Absolutely.
That's what we're talking
And
about.
that's,
The gist,
yeah.
the vibe,
And,
the gestalt of what we are going to talk about today.
way to
That's a little
jump
teaser.
into things
That's a
there.
teaser.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and so I'm watching Facebook, and Nate is watching YouTube, as he mentioned there. If you guys got anything you want to talk about, any questions, anything comes up, we're watching the comments, and we are happy to entertain any questions or just
Yes,
hear
sir.
from you.
Get us off on a tangent. Whoever has the best tangent gets. You know, you don't get a prize. We don't have a prize for you, but
Yeah,
you do
we have
get
to think
our
that one through and
underlying
figure out a
scorn
prize.
or admiration. One of those things, depending on.
Yeah, so
how far
you're doing
off
breeding
topic
bird
we go.
surveys, huh?
Yeah, I just did my second one. I've got my second of three. My first one was last week. My second one was this week. I love a breeding bird survey, despite the fact that you have to get up super early to be out there to start by 5:30 at sunup. But breeding bird surveys are a great way to test your ear birding. They're a great way to see what's going on, and you can't beat the data if you're kind of a bird data nerd like I am. You love comparing every year's list to all the years that came before it. The one that I did last week, I've been running for 10 years now, which is just about long enough to get some pretty decent data about what I see. And as I wrote on Facebook, I was running through this this breeding bird survey as you do, and in my head I was thinking, oh man, like I'm not seeing all that many birds, not a ton of species. My species count's going to be really low because I was missing some stuff that I normally get. Barn swallows I usually get at this little airport that we go by this, and
Hmm.
they were doing construction at the airport, so the barn swallows weren't nesting there this year, so I didn't get them. There's a couple of spots further down where I usually get grasshopper sparrow. 3 years out of four I'll get grasshopper sparrow, but I missed them this year. I was like, oh man, this year sucks. I'm not going to get anything. Go home, put all the birds into my spreadsheet, and my total species list was like bang on average. So right, I usually get between 60 and 65 species on this route, and I got like 62. So yeah, it turned out it was a perfectly fine route as they always are. And the one I did this week is the same way. Although actually that one felt really good. I was getting stuff I don't always get. So
And yeah, and it's, sometimes you can be thrown off when the species count is the same, but the number of individuals isn't.
right.
And it doesn't
Yeah, like I was
feel.
low on blue grosbeaks on my first one, and then I had a ton of blue grosbeaks on my second one, so who knows what's going on.
Yeah,
So,
it doesn't feel like you're seeing birds, and it feels like it's, when you're doing breeding bird
yeah.
surveys, that's obviously what you're doing. You're not.
Yeah.
Species
So
isn't the prime
right.
reason
True.
you're
But
out
it does
there.
it's a good, back of hand idea. And of course you're a little bit competitive. You're trying to figure out what you're doing. For people who aren't familiar, the Breeding Bird Survey route is a citizen science initiative that has been going on since the 1960s. It's basically a 25-mile route that people have done for, in some cases, many decades. You stop every half mile and do a 3-minute point count. So it's very precise in the measurements. You stop, you do your point count for 3 minutes, then you move on, and the whole thing lasts. It's about 4 hours from start to finish, and then I go home.
Yeah.
So it's like 5:30 to 9:30. The birds usually quiet down around 10, and then you're back, and it's neat. It's a neat thing to. It's
Yeah.
been one of the kind of the gold standards for bird conservation and bird population studies for decades and decades. And it's fun to be a part of that and know that a lot of other birders out there are doing their breeding bird survey routes around the same time. I'm sure a lot of you out there are doing it as well.
Yeah, I did one. I did one near
John
Chicago
Anderson
for a. Huh?
John Anderson says his start at 4:26. I do not look at 5:30 is good for me.
I did one for a few years out near area near Chicago here, and it was a place that has a few little. I won't call them remnant populations or disjunct, but for that, sort of that close to an urban area. But there are things like blue-winged warbler, blue grosbeak, yellow-breasted chat, Bell's vireo,
Yep.
as like one of the only places in the Chicago area to find some of those species, and it was neat
Yep.
to see them
I have a-
coming
I
back
have
to
a-
like the
I have a
same
route like
set of
that.
bushes every year.
Yeah, I have a route like that has one stop that has nesting horned larks, and I've gotten them for like the four consecutive years. It's actually kind of an unusual bird where I am. I didn't get them this year. I was a little sad about that. But there's like way more cultivation. Like people are growing tobacco out there a lot more than they have, and I wonder if that is part of the problem. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I have to compare it to next year, and we'll see.
Susan Nelson on Facebook says they're seeing local bluebirds on their third clutch already.
I'm not
Since
surprised.
they don't migrate in their area, what's to stop them from having at least 4 or 5 clutches in one season? And I would say,
Exhaustion.
yeah, really. They just get tired of
They
each
can get
other,
'em
and they're
out.
like, "Yeah, I'm done with you."
Bluebirds can pump them out. That's for sure. Yeah, I was getting Carolina wrens nesting as early as early March where I am, and so they're probably on their third by now. A lot of
I
times.
mean,
So it'll be-
I have spent 20 years watching the house sparrows in around my yard, and there have been a few years where they get like 6 clutches,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're I mean, there's fledglings popping out in October, like late September
Yeah.
and October.
Well, when you consider
Um,
the mortality rate for baby birds, something like
Yeah.
90%. I mean, sometimes you got to. So
Yeah, Mia McPherson says heat exhaustion. Yeah,
yeah,
that'll
probably
that'll
those
do it.
boxes can get hot. Yeah.
Yeah, and being baby bird season, if you, I was going to grab that wonderful graphic by Rosemary Moscow. If you,
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, just get on the Google and Google Rosemary Moscow baby bird. I found a bird. What should I do? 90% of the time or more, just leave it alone. You know,
Yep.
the birds are fledging. They
Good
they
rule of
pop
thumb
out of
for
the
most
nest.
all native
You know, you wind up
critters.
there's a robin sitting in your front lawn, and it's just like looks like it fell out of the nest. Well, the parents are there; they're going to take care of it. If it's truly in harm's way, like in a sidewalk and isn't moving, put it in a bush or something. But
Yep.
unless it's injured, leave them alone because the
Leave
parents are
them
taking care
alone.
of them, and
They
just
know
leave
what
them
to do.
be. They'll be fine.
Greg, should we talk about
But
some bird identification
we
photos? I think
are,
we've
we
done a
are. I
great job
have that.
vamping.
Yes, I have that dialed
Everyone's
up.
like, get to the birds.
Oh, we're
Get
right
to the
on
pictures.
schedule. Calm down. We're right on schedule here. Um, but before
Before
we
we
do, I
do,
just want
here's
to
one more
say,
thing where
oh,
we
there's
are going to
always
make a
one more
plug.
thing. There's
Yeah.
always one more thing. I just want to say that we are wrapping up our nesting season fundraising effort right now, and it is running through July 6th. And we have wonderful news that a donor has offered to match donations 1-to-1 up to $20,000. So if you give to the ABA and you want to support all the
Giving
things
it
we do, like this
twice as
show
much.
or the best natural history podcast out there, the
Oh,
best
except for the
birding
Bigfoot ones.
magazines out there. I will say that our web content is top notch. Everything ABA community, you want to be a part of this and you want to help. Hit that join button or the donate button. I'm sorry, hit the donate button until it feels good, and you will
It goes
double
twice as
your
far. It goes
you will
twice
double your
as far.
impact, and we would be most grateful. So I got a theme. I got a theme for today and I thought about
Theme
this
show.
because it's baby bird season. And baby birds are a particular conundrum because they don't look like what you would expect. And so you have to do a little more sleuthing, and you have to sort of put pieces together and sort of imagine what this bird is going to look like when it gets older. Or with certain species, it's just the general quality, as it says there, the general quality or character of something. So I put together some examples of just how important gestalt or feel is to birding. So
Feel,
we're gonna start
vibe,
with a vibe.
fizz,
That's a
as
good
the
one.
old school birders say.
How many times have you seen on Facebook or you've said, when we're looking at pictures of birds, it's like, yeah, that gives me a blah 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 vibe. And because it's true. So this one, my friend Don in Northern Illinois took this really spectacular field
Nice bird,
guide photo
for
of
sure.
a bird, um, and suggested an ID. And we had a discussion about this bird. So what do you got here, Nate?
Well, we've got a perching bird here, Passeriformes. We'll start there. We've got a bird that's got a relatively large head and kind of slender body. It's got a big old bill. It's sitting upright. It definitely gives me a flycatchery impression, and certainly flycatchers. There are a number of those birds in North America that are kind of generally greenish, brownish, yellow all over. That have wing bars, that have a kind of a large broad based bill. We can't really see the base of the bill here, but they do have a broad based bill and with some bristles. You can see the rictal
Yep.
bristles, which are the kind of hair like feathers that are around the bill on fly catching birds, allow them to catch flying insects. So, this is definitely a fly catcher. Upright posture, too, also helps.
Yep.
Open country sort of stuff. Um, it's got wing bars, so it's not a Phoebe.
Although
So I
although
think
this
it's
although this time of year,
not
I
great
mean,
field
Phoebes
work.
get here
Yeah.
early and start breeding. So I mean, it could be a young Phoebe. I mean, if we
Phoebes
just
also
go
have an
by
all
wing
dark
bars.
bill too, don't they?
Phoebe has an all dark bill.
Yeah. So this
Exactly.
has got a bicolor bill here, so that puts us in the Contupus or Empidanax flycatcher quandary, which
Yeah.
is traditionally one of the more difficult ones. So are we thinking peewee or are we thinking empid on this
Well, I
bird.
mean, in northern
I sort
Illinois,
of know what this bird is. Yeah, there's a number of them. Peewees, eastern wood peewee is definitely a possibility in northern
Susan
Illinois.
Nelson on Facebook suggests eastern wood pewee,
Mm-hmm.
and that is what the
Reasonable
photographer
assumption.
suggested as well. And so in northern Illinois, we've got a few birds that look like this. We've got a few Empidonax flycatchers. So we've got Acadian,
Yeah,
we've
how
got
many nesting
willow,
heads do you have?
we've got in a few places least, but really Acadian and willow are the two that we have here.
That is the case where I live as well. The willow is significantly less common. They're very local where I live.
Yeah, and actually they're all pretty local where we are here.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the peewees and the phoebe, as Nate said. Now, Nate's already gotten rid of phoebe as a possibility, so that leaves us
Yeah, it
with
doesn't look like a phoebe.
two possibilities here. The wing length, so the primary length is really, it's too short for Acadian flycatcher, and there's a lot of things about Acadian flycatcher that just don't fit for this bird. It actually has a little more of a peewee look, but as I said, the photographer suggested that this was an eastern wood peewee. So let's compare this to an eastern wood peewee.
Acadian flycatcher generally has pretty strong eye ring. This bird has an eye ring,
it does,
but not a super overt one, which says to me willow flycatcher or eastern wood peewee as you've chosen here.
Right, and
willow is for my money the most peewee-esque of the impids.
Tim Callback says Merlin says willow flycatcher with no other options. Well, that's just
then watch Merlin's program then.
Yeah. So, like Merlin is a tool for suggestions. But it should be suggesting eastern wood peewee, I think. But it's doing a good job there, at least for this bird.
The algorithm is right.
The algorithm is working.
Yeah.
But
so some things here, willow flycatcher and eastern wood peewee are pretty similar. As you can see here, they're both, willow flycatcher is the most peewee-esque of the Empidonax flycatchers. It's the biggest. It tends to have the least obvious eye ring, and it tends to be kind of very brown, although it's definitely a more kind of straw or greenish colored brown than the eastern wood peewee, which is pretty well cold gray brown here. But I know Greg's going to point this out. The wing length, he's already kind of teased primary projection as a tool here, and rightly so. Because if you look at the primary projection, so when we talk about primary projection, we're talking about those big, long flight feathers, the outer flight feathers, the primaries, and how far they scoop beyond the tertials, which are kind of the shield feathers that fold over the secondaries when the bird's wing is folded here. And the tertials are those big, broad, light-edged wing feathers towards the back of the bird.
Just above
on
the
both
rump.
of these birds, we can see them. Yeah, just above the rump. And when we talk about primary projection, we're talking about how far the primaries project beyond the tertials.
Right.
And it basically makes a bird look very long-winged and slender. Whereas you can see on the willow flycatcher, it does have, right. They long-winged birds tend to have longer migrations. Eastern wood peewee has a very long migration. They migrate all the way down into northern South America every year. So when we're looking at the primary projection here, you can see on the willow flycatcher, it's relatively blunted. It's not very long. It goes down to about the base of the tail. Whereas on the eastern wood peewee, that's a very long sickle-shaped primary feathers. That goes way long. And frequently, if you're looking up at this bird, which is a common, point of view when we're looking at flycatchers, the bird is sitting up above you and it's kind of backlit into the sky behind you and you're looking up at it. You can frequently see the very long wings of the eastern wood peewee kind of slide down on either side of the tail. And it's a very distinctive kind of profile for that bird. So primary projection is one of the first places you look. There's a few other things going on here as well that some folks have pointed out in the comments as well.
So, remembering the word gestalt, vibe, the parts that Nate was talking about, and a few more here. So it's got those long wings. It has a longer tail. It's overall
Yeah.
slimmer and longer. It's
Hmm.
got, as Nate said, sort of a cold gray green, but more gray than green than the willow flycatcher. Um, it's got the head is a different shape. It's got more of a peak
Yeah.
to it. Um,
Chunkier.
yeah, and it's got almost ridiculously small feet, like a
Yeah,
swallow.
yeah.
And
That's another thing you point out for wood peewee, as me McPherson pointed out in the comments there. Tiny little
exactly,
feet on a peewee.
tiny little feet on peewee and olive-sided flycatcher. Well, all the peewees and olive-sided flycatcher and all those birds in that genus, and these birds are in two different genuses, and when you get that sense for how they feel in total, they really are two different birds. I mean, the willow flycatcher's got those big, strong legs and the shorter wings and the shorter tail, and it's a little stockier.
Definitely
It's a little
stockier. Bill
greener.
as well.
The bill's a little heavier.
Hmm.
And it's just, they're different birds, even though they look very, very much alike.
Yeah.
Um, and there we
And
have.
also, the eastern wood peewee I frequently see in the woods, and a willow flycatcher I almost always see in willows. I mean, I say that as a joke, but man, willow flycatcher really does love to nest in willows.
It really
So you'll
does.
see
I
'em
mean,
a lot of those
and
places.
habitat status and distribution. I mean, eastern wood peewees, they're so common that they
Hmm.
can be almost anywhere, and birds do fly. And a bird that's, you know, an eastern wood peewee that's got its habitat at a wood edge that's right by a meadow that's got a
Yeah,
lot of willows.
a lot
There's
of
nothing
willows.
to
Yeah.
stop it from flying down and taking advantage of
Hmm.
some small
On
dragonflies
my
or whatever.
breeding bird survey, I saw
Yeah,
a eastern wood peewee on the edge of a meadow that had a lot of willows. Didn't see a
yeah.
willow flycatcher though.
So you know, it's certainly not. You can't really rule it out by habitat in that sense, but it's always a good idea to keep that in the back of your mind when you're in, you know, proper habitat. You know, you're in that open scrub habitat that willow flycatcher likes. That's kind of where your mind should go first. But
And I'll be
um,
honest, this time of year, both of them are probably making noise too. Like
yes,
the peewees are singing quite a bit right now, and willow flycatchers as well. They're defending territories. They're near their nests. They're singing, and so that definitely helps. They have
and
very
they have
very
very
different
different
vocalizations.
They have very different voices,
Yeah.
and they behave differently.
Mm.
But yeah, once you get the feel for how these birds, uh, you know, for the vibe of these birds, and if I'd thrown a peewee in there just for fun, that's in a different genus,
A
and it
phoebe, you
has,
mean?
yeah, sorry, a phoebe,
Yeah.
that's in a different genus, and even though it's very similar, it's really quite different.
Hmm.
So this is one of my favorites because every year it pops up, and every year I think that this is one of the most confusing birds that we have here in the ABA
Oh,
area
without a doubt.
for new and intermediate birders. It's because
The expert birders have made this
oh, even
mistake
yeah. I mean, what am I saying? We have seen expert
famously.
birders flub this bird more than once. um, so this is actually two individuals of the same species from the person who submitted it uh, found several of them. So this is two of the three
Like
that
you
they
do.
photographed to give you an idea of size, shape, all of that, and habitat. What do you see here?
So whenever I see that sort of pattern, as you see on the back of the bird on the left, that sort of scaly feathers, the pale edges to the feathers on the back and on the upper wings, the coverts on the wings, I'm immediately thinking a younger bird, because that first bit of juvenile plumage when birds get their first full set of feathers after their downy feathers, they're very mottled. They're very it's well so they're well camouflaged, but it's a very unique look, and a lot of birds have lots
Mm-hmm.
frequently very fine stripes, very fine scalloping, things of that nature. So I'm immediately thinking of a young bird when I look at those. The problem with this bird, of course, is that in this place there is an adult bird that is quite uncommon. but still possible in Colorado like this, that would be also have sort of fine scalloping on the adult plumage, which is what throws a lot of people off. And that
Yeah.
is, a bird that walks around on the ground like this, is pipit, Sprague's pipit, which is a North American endemic, breeds in the northern Great Plains and winters in the southern shortgrass prairies of of United of what is it? Texas, New Mexico, Arizona,
Yeah.
northern Mexico,
So
things
so
like that.
so
But it's
let's
sort of an unusual bird that people don't encounter very often, but they're always looking for in a lot of these places.
right. Yeah. So let's back up a second. The bird's got a rather small bill. Seems like it has
Hmm.
rather sturdy legs.
Hmm.
It's got a lot of pattern on the back.
Hmm.
It's got wing bars that are kind of unusual. The bird has that, as you said, all over
Got a
speckly,
baby bird look.
um, speckly kind of scaly look to it. Um, we see the bird on the right walking around in the grass, like got its head up, looking around, looking at you. Um, we can see in both of the images a little bit of dark on the face that goes from the eye straight down. And that's, young birds and birds that are molting, they can get feather tracts pulled apart and things like that. But that's actually there. That's coloration. Um, and so you put that all together and you can rule out things like, well, what do we got out there? We got American Pipit, which does not have anywhere near that amount of speckling or patterning on
Definitely
the
not
back.
scalloping on the back.
We've got
Yeah.
the long spurs, like chestnut collared and, um, uh, Jesus, large billed.
Thick-billed Smiths.
Well, Smith's is in
Um,
Alaska right now. Um,
yeah, fair enough.
but I mean, the bird doesn't have that heavy bill that a long spur would have, or any
No.
of the sparrows, any of the grassland sparrows. And but you got to get back. It doesn't look streaked. And that's the key, is that there's really no streaking on this bird. So let's cut to the chase and identify it and talk about, as you said, the biggest
Stumbling block.
the biggest conundrum concerning this bird. So the bird in question is a juvenile horned lark, and you can see in the bird below, on the left, how it's got those white speckles and the back is all speckly. That is a key field mark for juvenile horned lark. And but also look at the shape, the gestalt, if you will, again, of the horned lark. It's stockier, it's
Shorter billed.
shorter necked. I mean, Sprague's pipit, I included that image of the Sprague's pipit on the right because that is almost always how you see them if they're not flying.
Mm.
They're walking away from you and they're
Yeah.
looking over like this, and they have that sort of dove, that small
Yeah.
dove-headed look,
Big
and
blank face.
blank face, and they bob their heads as they walk. But if you Google up pictures of Sprague's pipit, you will see them in this pose like most of the time,
Yeah,
just
it's true.
like that. um, and I think Sibley even illustrates it in that pose. But you see that the back is streaked, and it doesn't have that sort of black and white, sort of speckled pattern. The face is much more open. It's just much more slender than the horned lark.
Yeah, there's more going on the breast as well on the horned lark. Sprague pipit is kind of famously plain breasted. It's sort of one of the ways you can tell from American pipit, which tend to be kind of streaky on the breast or on the collar. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and horned larks are particularly confusing, for another reason. Juvenile horned larks, that is, because they are one of our earliest nesting. They are our
Yeah, very
earliest
strange
nesting
breeding
passery.
biology. Yeah.
And like in central northern Illinois, they will fledge young in March.
Hmm.
And so you run across a bird like this in March, and you're like, okay, it can't be a fresh juvenile because it's
Right.
March in Illinois or in Iowa or Nebraska or wherever,
Colorado.
and or Colorado, and you're like, it can't be a juvenile bird because of how early it is. But in the case of a horned lark, it
Yeah,
is.
they get busy very early in the year, as soon as the snow thaws in a lot of places, and before
Yeah,
in others.
yeah. So this one comes to us from Peachtree Corners, Georgia.
This is a weirdo. This is kind of not far from where I live, so this is a bird that I would encounter regularly in my neck of the woods. But it does not tick any boxes. This is definitely a brain bird, one that kind of makes you go, "Ugh, what am I looking at
It
here?"
is,
Um,
but it is a brain bird, but it looks as completely nondescript and weird and just like, what is
yeah,
this? There is really nothing else that looks like it. And once you become familiar with it,
yeah.
it's immediately identifiable if you get a decent look.
For sure. Some things you can narrow it down to pretty easily. It's got that big old thick sparrow bill. So
Yes.
definitely a place to start. There aren't any sparrows that sort of have this sort of very narrow streaking, though that is sort of a young bird thing. And the tail looks awfully long on this
Yep.
bird. And it's certainly not a song sparrow, which would be sort of your regularly occurring kind of long-tailed sparrow you might expect to see in a place
Mm-hmm.
in the southeast. Bill's too big for a song sparrow for starters. It doesn't have any pattern on the head, very plain head, and it's kind of a very richly colored on the flight feathers here on the wing and on the tail.
And the tail, yeah. And that's a good clue because that again, it's kind of a strange brownish, almost rufusy
Mm-hmm.
brown color that's not like any other bird that you would find in the area. There are other birds that might have the same kind of similar color, but not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Susan Nelson says female indigo bunting, perhaps, and
Not a
um,
bad, not a bad
not a
guess.
not a bad call, because a female indigo bunting would have the faint streaks on the breast like that.
Mm-hmm.
Although these streaks are a little bit heavy. I
Yeah,
think the bill is a little bit heavy
I agree
for
with you. I agree with you.
for
This is more of a
a bunting.
grosbeak-esque bill.
It's yeah, and
Not quite
it's
that big, but getting there.
and the tail appears to be too long. Um,
Yeah, I agree with
you know,
that.
and buntings they present differently. This seems to be a rather robust bird. The buntings
Big,
present
thick
again. They
legs.
have that gestalt of being kind of smallish, and I didn't put one in the comp. I should have put a female indigo bunting in there, but I
Mhm.
used a different bird. So how about if we cut to the chase and identify this one? And it is a juvenile eastern towhee,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
so you can see here it's got that long tail, a mark that it's hard to tell whether or not it's a photo artifact. It's not, and that is the white spot at the base of the primary, so like right at the bend of the wing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a white spot there, and the juveniles get that really early. You can see a little bit of it in the bird above, but you remember that kind of brown color we were talking about? You see in the bird above where the photo's not so washed out.
Yeah.
They have that bizarre brown color that's really kind of unlike anything else.
One of the things that stands out to me on this young bird too is bare parts and anything that isn't the feathers are going to be the sort of thing that persists from these young birds all the way into the adult birds. And you can
Mm-hmm.
see one of the famous field marks of an eastern towhee that maybe people don't notice when they're looking at kind of the clean colored black and white and rufusy bird is the bright red eye on an eastern towhee. Stands out almost, well, except in the very far southeast where they are kind of white or peachish. But for the most part, the eye is very brightly colored, strikingly so, and you can see the orangish kind of amber eye
Yep,
on that
it's
young
starting to
bird.
get that.
It's starting to get that, so you can see it. Whereas you would not see that on any of the other birds that you have comped here, or on an indigo bunting either.
Yeah, and I picked song sparrow because it is our longest tailed of the common
For sure.
sparrows, and so that just in terms of overall shape, yeah, towhee is almost kind of looks like a little pheasant sometimes with that long
Yeah.
tail and the way they
They
walk
throw it
around.
around
And
too.
yeah, they do. Song sparrow is more compact. It's got a smaller bill. The streaking, even in a juvenile bird like the song sparrow on the right, the streaking is more crisp, more defined, especially on the head. This bird's got a very plain face. And remember, when it's an adult, it'll just have a full black head. Like everywhere that's that
brown.
rich
It's a
brown
female. Yeah.
is going to turn black or deep rich brown on the female. And then the brown-headed cowbird on the left, it's a big, stocky bird with big black feet and a big black bill and kind of it's just a completely different shape.
Different shape, shorter tail.
Yeah.
Longer wing, shorter tail. Yeah.
And Frank Lehman makes a good point, which is
Exactly.
always a point we
Point
make.
that out.
In the field, I got to imagine that it would have been easier to ID than in an isolated photo. Yes,
doubt.
that is always the case.
Because it's going to be doing towhee things. It's going to be hopping
Right.
around on the ground. It's going to be scratching with both feet, throwing stuff back behind it. It's going to be wagging that giant tail around back and forth. And it's going to be acting like a towhee, and that's going to make things a lot easier.
Yeah, although I will say that I have been confused by eastern towhee in this plumage. I remember one time I was down at a place south of Chicago called Kankakee Sands, and I was walking through a field that had some scrubby trees and things, and this bird just popped up out of the grass and went into a dark, in the trees, sort of in the dark, in the
Classic
shade,
towhee
and just
behavior. Yeah.
and just sat there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck is this? And I didn't get it until it turned around and flipped that tail at me and took off.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yes, that was a case of in the field, it's going to move around. You're going to see those field marks. So yes, this is a juvenile eastern towhee, another really confusing baby bird of summer.
Spotted towhee, I imagine, would be quite similar. Maybe show a little bit more on the wings, but I'm not sure.
Think they're probably pretty identical.
I'd expect, yeah.
Maybe showing a little bit of pattern on the wing and on the back, but yeah, and all the towhees basically have the same shape.
Yeah,
they do.
These big old sparrows with long tails.
Yeah. So this one comes from South Carolina, and it was in two groups, actually. It was in South Carolina birding and in What's This Bird? And this is another one. When I saw this, I knew immediately what it was, although it is one of the most confusing pairs of birds, one of two very confusing birds in the eastern part of the United States. And not a bird we see in the daylight very often.
Not a bird you see, period, very often.
Yeah.
A bird that you're more inclined to hear for sure. This is one of our night jars, which are goat suckers, caprimulgids. They're all very cryptically plumaged. A lot of times they look more like a piece of bark, richly colored bark, than an actual bird. They're not only good at hiding their color in these sorts of landscapes, but they're frequently very good at hiding their form as well.
Absolutely.
They look very much like a broken off branch or whatever. They're super easy to overlook, even though you might encounter them somewhat regularly this time of year in the South, for sure.
Although, or in the summertime, like now, they're on the ground on eggs or taking care of young. And the pattern of feathers, the pattern on their feathers really blends in. So in the eastern half of in South Carolina, we've got two species that we have to deal with, and that is Chuck-Will's widow and eastern whippoorwill. And the reason we're not including common nighthawk here is that you really wouldn't see a common nighthawk in the trees like this, but we can also see the bottom of the tail, the end of the tail there, and the nighthawk has a long kind of notched tail with very well defined bands toward the end, and it doesn't look like this at all.
They also
Look
like
at
to
that.
sit kind of long ways.
You sneezed and
They're
made
both
me
sneezing.
cough.
I know. But they tend to sit kind of long ways on the branches too, not crossways like this bird is, which is kind of a weird thing with nighthawks. They will, the
Yes.
branch is running, they'll be with the branch rather than across the branch,
I've
like
seen
this
them
bird
sit
is.
on wires like that.
Yeah,
Like just
yeah,
I don't
they're
know how
so
they're doing
weird.
it, but they're just like
Yeah,
balanced lengthwise on the wire. Um, but so yes, we are dealing with uh, either a Chuck-Will's widow or an Eastern whippoorwill, and so here are the two compared side by side, and the reason that I was comfortable IDing the bird on the left pretty much the moment I saw it, again, is because of how it felt, the gestalt. Um, it's a big-headed bird. It looks big. It's
flat.
kind of got a longer neck. It just looks kind of hefty. And the bird on the right is an Eastern whippoorwill. The bird on the left is a Chuck-Will's widow.
Hmm.
Eastern whippoorwills are smaller. They're much more compact. They have a they have a big head, but not as much neck.
Yeah,
They tend to have a smaller
rounder
bill.
head. Yeah.
They tend also not to have that. You can see a little bit of pale lower mandible on the Chuck-Will's widow,
Mhm.
but also how flat that bird's head is too. Um, all of that gives an impression. And part of the impression is that even though these birds are very similar, they live in the same woods, often side by side, they feed on different things. The Chuck-Will's widow is much bigger. And yes, they do both feed on moths. Whippoorwill is a moth specialist. And, a lot of times when you see them sitting on a road, some people say, oh, they sit there to keep warm because the road is warm. Well, not really. What they're doing is they're sitting there and they're looking up, and when a moth goes flying across the road, they like a flycatcher, they go up and get it and then come back, and they're watching for moths flying over across the road. Chuck-Will's widow, on the other hand, will do that with small birds,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
a yellow
they'll
warbler,
overwinter. They'll
like a yellow
overwinter
warbler
in some
just getting
places on the
started in the
coast.
morning, or a
Yep.
gnatcatcher.
Yellow rumped warblers they like to eat on the outer banks. Actually, they'll stay the winter
Yeah,
through the winter in these sort of coastal areas in the southeast, and they'll basically eat yellow rumped warblers all winter long.
a Chuck-Will's widow is sort of our version of a frogmouth. I mean,
Yeah,
it will eat anything it can fit in that gigantic mouth, and they
people
are not
people sort of
small birds.
underestimate how big these birds are. I was just gonna say, like, you look in the field guide and you think that it's a relatively small bird like a common nighthawk, which is not super large. Now chucks are like Cooper's hawk size, like a small Cooper's hawk. Like when you see a whip
Like
fly
a male
over,
Cooper's hawk.
it's a big bird. Like, surprising how big it is. Very broad winged, broad tailed, large headed. Like, it
Yeah,
looks like a Cooper's hawk when it flies over.
just looking
Yeah.
here to see the wingspan. 26 versus 19, and the wingspan, and
Yeah, Chuck has a large bird, substantial bird.
in weight, we're talking it's more than double in weight. Eastern whippoorwill 1.9 ounces, Chuck-Will's widow 4.2. So it's like almost double the mass of an Eastern
Yeah.
whippoorwill. And when you get a chuck perched up like this and you see it well, it's pretty easy. But sometimes it's not when they're hunkered down. And one little known field mark, if you can get close enough to the bird and either observe it or get a really good picture, is the rictal bristles on Eastern whippoorwill are straight. They're just like one long whisker. On a Chuck-Will's widow, they're branched. They have little branches coming
Oh, I
off of
didn't know
them,
that.
almost like they're trying to form like a web like this. And if you can get it close enough, you can see that. So now we're staying out east. We're going to Cape May, New Jersey.
Yeah, we got a turn here. It's got the forked tail. It's
Okay,
an
there we go.
all of. Well, I mean, why
Let's just
mess
cut
around?
right
We're
to the
looking
chase.
that the black cap and the bright orange bill. It's a tern. These are pretty common seabirds that you see out there. Kind of pale silvery gray on the back, mostly white underneath. Um, Black tip bill. This is one of our sterna
Yep.
terns, which are we have four species here in Cape May, all possible.
Mm-hmm.
So common, Forsters, Arctic, and roseate. The last two are the least common. Well, yeah, which makes sense. Common tern and Forsters are going to be the most common. Arctic tern and roseate are going to be the least common
Do you
in
not
this
get
place, but still
Caspian out there?
possible. In the east, yeah, Caspian, but they're not a sterna. They're a
That's true.
thalicious or
But
whatever.
if you're looking at terns with big orange bills, Caspian tern, we can rule out Caspian tern by how
Tail's
long
different. Yeah.
the tail is, and the
Yeah.
orange legs. Caspian has
Mhm.
black legs. Plus, it's just a much bigger.
It's massive.
It's a massive
full-sized
bird.
tern.
It's the size of a ring-billed gull.
Mhm.
So I think with that orange bill and the orange legs, we're really looking at two birds here, and that's common and Forsters, which is
Mhm.
another conundrum for people living. Geez, almost
Those
anywhere
are
in the
those are
ABA
tough
area.
ones. Arctic tern will generally be much more compact with a much smaller bill.
Yes,
Oftentimes it's quite kind of blood red almost. Roseate tern, very slender, typically with a longer black bill,
black bill.
especially this time of year. Very, very pale on the backside as well. When they're sitting, you can tell the difference. But common and Forsters are the two most difficult ones, the two most similar ones for sure.
Yeah, and as I said, when I was up at Sheboygan, I had we had some fun up there, not only with the gulls but some terns, and I got this picture of a Forster's and a common taking off side by side on the beach, and you can see a couple of things. Number one, you can see how much bigger the bill is on the Forsters. I mean, even these birds aren't blown up in your face. But the Forster's tern just has a much bigger bill. The common tern is grayish underneath with sort of a white cheek, sort of a slash. I'm gonna back up and see how clean and white that whole face and neck area is. And whoops, the common tern has just a different feel to it, with that dark cap and the white slash under it,
More
and then the gray
dainty.
underparts this time of year. But
And
note
all of
how
those things I should point out are even more exaggerated on an Arctic tern, which is even grayer underneath, and even
yes,
smaller with the bill, and even like more obvious with the white cheek.
yes,
So yeah.
and then we can also see another field mark. What would separate it from Arctic is those long, big orange legs. Arctic tern, like a peewee, has ridiculously tiny little feet,
little tiny feet.
and
They sit
tiny
very
legs.
low,
It
close
almost
to the
looks like
sand. Yep.
they waddle around because they can't they can't really
Yeah,
get
when you
up
see
off
one
the sand
perched,
very
it's
much.
absurd. Yeah.
And then the last thing, the tail, and you'll notice how long the tail is in the Forster's tern. We saw it very well in this picture. Bird's got very long outer tail feathers. And here again, we can see the length of the outer tail feathers on the bird on the left versus the bird on the right. And the other thing you notice is how much sort of dark gray there is in the Forsters versus the common. So the outer tail feathers have the outer web is much thinner than the inner web. And let's see if we can see it on this one here. Not really. But you can see it on the bird on the left. The inner web of the Forster's tern is kind of a darkish, smudgy gray. And on a common tern, it's the outer web of those feathers. And with their tail spread like this, you can really see it's like, well, there's a black streak on the Forster's tern tail. And you really don't see anything like that on the common tern.
No. Nope.
So our bird in question is a Forster's tern.
Forster's tern. Big
Now-
old bill, I mean, that's when I see these two birds, that's sort of the first thing I'm looking for, and then
Yeah,
everything else sort of falls into place.
exactly, exactly. So now we're gonna do your favorite. A beach full
It's
of
the middle of
gulls.
summer, Greg. There's
And
no
these are summer.
goals
These
to
are the
talk about.
gulls of summer. And so this is another picture. This is something we talked about the last time we were here. We just had one bird. Um, but this picture I took on Sheboygan Beach a couple of weeks ago, and it really shows the difference. So the bird we were looking at was a lesser blackback gull, and we were concerned with differentiating it from great blackback gull.
Hmm.
But really, the bird that it's hard to tell apart from is herring gull.
Yep.
And so in this picture, there are 10 lesser blackback gulls. And once you know what to look for, they really stand out. And again, it's the gestalt, it's the vibe. And the lesser blackback gull is slimmer, it's longer, it's got a white head, a black bill, and it has sort of mottling and speckling on the bottom or streaking, whereas herring gull is more kind of
Muddy.
just kind of muddy gray underneath. Yeah. Um, the dark mantle, even in these first cycle birds here, the dark mantle doesn't stand out as much as it does on the lesser blackback. Like if you squint your eyes, you can tell the dark mantled
There's a
birds
couple
from the
birds in
herring
here that
gulls.
look dark mantled. There's
There are.
probably what it is, probably second or third year birds.
There, and then there's one in
Yeah.
back that is almost an adult.
Almost an adult. Yep.
What's interesting is we were out on this beach. We had 87 lesser blackback gulls on this
That's
beach.
absurd
It was,
for the center of the country.
and there were none that were adults.
Hmm.
The closest we got was third cycle, like far into the third cycle, but they still had brown feathers on
Well,
the.
makes sense.
the
I mean, we're in
upper
the
part of the
breeding
wing.
season, so the breeding adults are probably wherever they are.
breeding
North
adults
America
are breeding, and you'll
Appledore
notice-
Island.
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice all of these birds, the ring-billed gulls in the back, you've got a Bonaparte's gull up front. Every single one of these birds, for the most part, is a
Subadult.
non-breeding bird.
Yeah.
Even, the ring-billed gulls that look like they're adults, they don't
look
have
a little messy.
they don't have apical
Yeah.
spots. There's a little
Yep.
more black in the wing. These birds are not full adult yet. So what these gulls do in the summertime is they just loaf.
Don't migrate.
They don't migrate.
Stay
They
where
just hang out.
stay where they're supposed to be. Yeah, or stay where they
So
were.
I have here now marked the 10 lesser blackback gulls with little yellow dots, so you can see exactly which ones they are. And once you start comparing them to the herring gulls, especially like the one up in front, just left of center, and the two herring gulls to the right, you can really see the difference there.
You can certainly see the smaller bill. You can certainly see the longer wings and the pattern on the front of the bird for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's very illustrative of the two birds that are kind of in the front. So
Yeah.
those two herring gulls like front and center, and then you've got the two lesser backs just
Yep.
off to the left, and you can see even in this photo on my relatively small laptop. You can see the patterning on the lesser backs is much more well defined than it is on those two herrings.
Absolutely, and it's got more of an attenuated shape. It's slimmer, kind of gives it a little bit of a longer legged look.
Yeah.
Also,
And
another
the
thing,
smudgy
Go ahead.
eye as well. You can see
A
that
lot
a
of
little
them-
bit.
a lot of them have the smudgy eye
mostly
that
there on a lot of
almost
those
looks like a
birds.
little helmet.
Yeah.
Which you'll see some of them, like the bird sitting down dead center, is losing that, and the head is bleached almost white, pure white, and that's another
mantle's
thing.
starting to
You
look good on that
see a
bird,
bird
though.
like that with a white head and a black bill. It's probably going to be a lesser blackback gull, although I have seen some herring gulls that approach that. But you'll also notice that bird has a little bit of mascara left.
Yep.
Behind the eye there, and they tend to have that smudginess around the eye. So yeah, we've got 10 young lesser blackback gulls in this picture. We've got a few herring gulls in the back. Those are mostly ring-billed gulls, and then in the front there is one Bonaparte's gull.
A question for you, Greg. I'm looking at some of the wing panel on some of these herring gulls, especially these two in the front, and then there's one sitting down at about 2 o'clock from the almost adult lesserback, kind of
Okay,
in the
yep.
back left. There's definitely some pale. Is that wear on those birds? And it seems to be more obvious on the herring gulls than it is
You're
on
talking
all
about
of
like
the herring gulls.
on the upper
Yeah,
wing
kind of on the
coverts.
shoulder, upper wing covers. Is that wear or is that feather? Is that pigment?
I believe that's wear.
Okay.
But you see it commonly, and as the summer goes on, you'll see
Yeah.
that
Well,
they
certainly
get
the
like this
herrings show it more
bold
than
white.
yeah, yeah. No, I've seen that, and that's when the feathers look really crappy,
Yeah,
on those birds.
and you
Yeah.
can see it. You can see it coming in on the herring gull to the right. There's like three yellow dots on the right side of the screen, and
Hmm.
right dead center between those that triangle of three dots, there's a herring gull. Um,
Exactly. That's got that wear on
and you
the.
can see that white wear in the lesser wing coverts, and then again the secondaries have that
Hmm.
feather wear that gives it that kind of like a black bar, almost like a carpal bar,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Yeah. 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 And there's also a very yeah. I mean, in the far left of the photo too. There's another kind of young herring gull that has some ton of feather wear going on. There's also what appears to be almost an adult herring gull, kind of between two lesserbacks. It's sitting on the beach. I don't know if that's. It looks like a herring
Yeah, I
gull,
think yeah, I think you're right. I'm gonna have
adultish
to look at
or
I'm
close to
gonna
an
have to
adult.
look at other pictures of that bird,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it appears to be an adult herring gull. It when I was looking, it didn't stand out as anything else. But yeah, I
no,
think you're right. Now
yeah.
herring gulls do breed there. When you're
Okay,
driving
well,
when you're
there's your
driving
answer.
through Sheboygan, um, across from the harbor, they nest on rooftops on people's
Hmm.
houses, and there's all these gulls standing up there building nests. And I think it's only a matter of time until we get lesser blackback gulls breeding there.
Really? Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
I
it's
mean, they're certainly breeding in eastern Canada somewhere. So
somewhere, some well,
yeah,
other than Appledore Island, there's just too many of
yeah,
them to just be coming
yeah,
from Appledore.
yeah.
Um, so that is what we got for birds. We're right at the mark here
Ooh, we
almost.
hit it.
So
Dang.
if you guys have anything that you want to talk about, Facebook has been really quiet. I don't know if it's just not re up updating for me, but
I
you
blame
guys,
Zuckerberg.
yeah, you
Rachel
guys have
Brenner
been
notes
quiet on
in
Facebook.
YouTube the species she almost didn't get for her list because she thought herring, and moved on until someone else showed up asking if she'd seen the lesser blackback gull. I hope you got the lesser blackback gull, Rachel. Yeah, but there's a lot of lesser blackback gulls out around, especially in the eastern third of the continent these days. So definitely a bird to keep on your radar when you're out there looking at large groups of gulls. There's almost it feels so weird. I would have said it 10, 15 years ago, but there's always a lesser blackback gull in there these days. I've seen them well inland now and flocks of gulls, especially
Well,
around
as
landfills.
as I was
Good,
saying
she
on
did get it.
Facebook,
Yeah.
when Amar and I were looking at these birds and counting them, and we did a very precise count. He thought that we might have a high total for the Great Lakes, or at least Lake
Yeah.
Michigan, and it turns out that it wasn't.
Oh, how close were you?
Yeah,
Not close at all.
87. No, I think there was one in Michigan or Wisconsin, somewhere else in Wisconsin. It was like 125.
Yeah. Well, we
Um,
were regularly getting 200-300 on the Outer Banks at Cape
yeah,
Point
well,
among the
that's
gulls these days. It's incredible.
and to think that Illinois had its first record in 1980,
Yeah.
in
That's nuts.
April of 1980. Susan
Susan
Nelson
Nelson deals.
asks,
Oh, you got it.
"Oh yeah, okay. What's the deal with all the flamingos in New York?" Well, I think there's only one,
This
maybe
is still
two.
only one. Oh,
Yeah, it's
one.
just one,
Just
kind of
one.
moving around a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. On Long
Um,
Island. Yeah.
I'm sure that that's one of the leftovers from the hurricane last year,
Yeah, it
and
looks like a young bird, and it might be. I mean, they're sticking around in a lot of places from even from the Adalia birds last year. There's, South Carolina has had them throughout. Florida certainly has. Texas has had them. So it stands to reason that some of these young birds are doing what young flamingos do and dispersing. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
wandering up the coast and then come back, and it's interesting that unlike
first
the
limpkins, then
uh,
flamingos, then snail
well,
kites. It's
yeah,
nuts
but
here.
that's but the limpkins and the flamingos are two very different situations. Limpkins are following a new food source, and it looks like last winter might have killed off a lot of them because they didn't really know how to migrate.
Yeah,
They wandered
unsurprisingly.
following the food source north, and then several of them were found just kind of wandering around places covered in ice, like not knowing
Yeah,
what to do.
like Southern
Um,
Ontario, and yeah.
yeah, well, there's one or two in northern Illinois or in Wisconsin.
Hey,
Um,
I don't know whether we not had the sort of Limpkin invasion this summer that we had last. I guess it's still early. It
it's
seems like the
early.
balance of them come in July and August and
It's
September. So
yeah.
perhaps we'll see it
I
again.
mean, the first one in Illinois, I think, was in April, but then it wasn't until June that another one was found, and it was right
Yeah, and
around
then
now, right
yeah,
around mid June, and then it was like, oh, there's one, there's two, there's three, there's four, there's five.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the flamingos were blown up by Hurricane Dahlia, and scattered across Florida and scattered across the Gulf, and that was an event, and those birds just stayed.
yeah.
And
Well, in
there was
Florida and
there
South
were
Carolina, yeah,
there were 300 flamingos that were documented that were blown up on Hurricane Dahlia. And many of those birds have just stayed. And like I said last year, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the establishment of a satellite breeding colony somewhere in Florida,
somewhere in
of
Florida. Yeah.
that Rio Lagarto colony in the Yucatan,
Yeah.
because they've
It makes sense. The places that they're showing up are places that you are not all that different from the places where they are. I mean, we're talking a bird that is a salt marsh bird, and
yeah,
there are salt marshes all the way up the coast. So
yeah.
they'll find food wherever they are. So, yeah.
All right. Well, join us at ABA Community, where we have our own little social media experience that is for ABA members, and we talk about all kinds of fun bird stuff. And you can share your pictures and your stories and ask questions. And ABA staff and other members are there, and there's been a lot of stuff going on there lately. It's been good. And again, do not forget before we go to hit that aba.org/nesting season. And you can go right to our homepage and click the big graphic there, and give till it hurts. And like I said, up to $20,000 is being matched 1-to-1
Yep.
right now. So your donation goes twice as far, and we really, really appreciate it. And you support
Absolutely.
all of the things that we do, our Young Birder program, and all of the fine materials that we put out for the birding community.
We'll be back in a couple weeks.
Yes, we will.
You join the ABA or go to our website, aba.org, and sign up for our Flight Calls newsletter, and we'll let you know. We'll give you a little
Yep.
bit of heads up.
Yep.
But we're planning on being back in 2 weeks throughout the summer, and we'll see you then.
Yep.
Till next time, everybody.
See ya.
Bye bye.